Well, some of the facts you cannot ignore. I mean, you see transformation of a lot of companies, but you put it in the right way. There are opportunities and there's stress, and we have to put it in the right perspective.
So I do think that a very important thing to recognize is that all these exponential threads, right, are based on one, that is the exponential thread in computing. And these things is not going on as was going on in the past forever. There is a lot of work to do there. And AI, blockchain, big data, all the application AR are all interconnected one with the other. So if we are not doing right one of these things, an exponential times a zero is a zero. Okay, so we need to do much more, and everybody here knows to create possible solutions that create a real value for the business, for the world.
We'll talk about that value.
I agree. There are lots of facts that we cannot deny, and I always get a bit itchy if it's too much marketing. For me, it was a bit too much marketing. Because when you think about it, there's technology and then there's the application. And I think the most inspirational part might have been missing in the sense that it takes entrepreneurial imagination to make that link between technology and the applications. That you have the digital camera, that's already an application, not technology. And I would have liked for him to mention actually Fujifilm as an example, because Fujifilm turned the corner. They reinvented themselves based on the technological resources they have, and that's entrepreneurial imagination again. And I think this is the stuck in the middle where we can hopefully talk about later on, because there are many entrepreneurs in here that want to bring technology to the application states where they make these changes.
Well, I think it's reality, and although obviously it's kind of sketchy in marketing, the typical US way, but I think we can also learn from this, because that's reality. And the question is always, in this Kodak example and other examples, how to draw conclusions out of this. So how can we get better in not making these false decisions and learning out of this history, or what we experienced in the last 10, 20 years. And I also believe of this acceleration of exponential acceleration in many dimensions, and the question really is how you, also entrepreneur, can basically benefit from this and be part of this. And some say, well, should we not slow down and fight this? Yes, maybe, but probably this is happening anyways. So that's why I think it's rather think about how to make the best out of it and make use of what you can learn out of these developments in the past.
Yes, I think we all know all these numbers and Moore's law, but this is all about data and data processing. Unfortunately, if it comes to physical world, the closer it comes to our real world, it's unfortunately not exponential. He showed at the end the real challenges: energy, climate change, food. Unfortunately, I think there will be no solution which will exponentially change that we can have every year double the food getting out of from the field. And I think this is important to understand. We created a new world, which is this cyberspace with data, which has an enormous influence on our daily life. But unfortunately, it will not solve everything. And this is sometimes a little bit the message. Yes, we will solve then also the water problem, the energy problem. This is physics. And physics is not so easy to change. In principle, there is a couple of physical laws you cannot change, and they will never be exponential.
Okay, and you've brought up some really great points, each one of you. But let's make sure. The panel, obviously, is to present different views and different perspectives on this topic. So I want to make sure that all of you probably heard the flavor of each of their backgrounds, but let me make sure I do proper introductions. Roland, he's robotics expert, can I officially calling you that, professor at ETH Zurich, director of the Autonomous Systems Lab and the Institute of Robotics and Intelligent Systems. And Mark Gruber, vice president, innovation at EPFH, which also serves as professor for entrepreneurship and technology and commercialization. Alessandro here with IBM. So more of our corporate lens on this, where you're serving as an IBM fellow, vice president of IBM Europe and director of the IBM Research Lab in Zurich. And Christian, Detlef, sitting right here, Vice President for Research and Corporate Relations at ETH Zurich, and then also Christian, partner with Early Bird Venture Capital. So we have about a half an hour, so we'll start with some questions here, but open it up then live to the floor here in a little bit. So start thinking about you got some folks who know this space. So what to you is, first of all, is really what do you agree with is that it's about this abundance and scarcity mindset that's really driving this change? I already heard some of you allude to that. But thinking about the impact of where things could go. Really, technology, you said data, what really is going to be the driver behind exponential technology?
Probably I can start with some thoughts. I think what is important is data and data processing, but it's also connectivity. And I think what really happens today that if something new arrives, it spreads out immediately to the whole world. And I think this makes a difference, and this has an influence on all businesses, even of those businesses which are not exponential, but they will actually at least people will have exponentially fast access to this new business because we have these tools. And I think this is something all companies have to understand. I think the startups, they already understand it because they are young people and they're living already with this since their birth. And some older companies probably are missing this.
Alessandro.
So, my point again, I do think that the possibilities and the realm of possibilities that all this technology will provide is really very big and could help also to solve some real problems of our society, even if you are completely right, physics world, if it's finite, there is nothing that can grow exponentially and be impacted exponentially, right? But we need to do that right. And I give an example. You speak about exponential in computing that create exponential data that are distributed, that are everywhere, right? You can make sense of this data and take better decisions. But if these data are corrupted, are tampered, are not right, and you don't have the right technology, right, to make sure that at least this data have value inside, whatever you do on top with AI to take a better decision has no value. So then you have blockchain. Blockchain can help in doing this, and many people here believes that that will be a very important platform to bring reliability to the data, okay? But blockchain, to be secured, is based on security modules that are based on today current security that eventually could be broken by next generation computing like quantum. So a lot of work, it is still needed in research and development to make sure that we are doing things right at all levels.
But do we have time for that? I mean, he's saying that all the industries are going to change in the next decade.
Right, but if you look where this innovation comes from, this is really fundamental research done at either research labs or at the universities. And as Christian asked for some easier way for promoting startups, what you see here is just impressing the entire world by showing that they actually spent the money to provide a proper paved way for the last mile. If we don't take the money then also in the hand and bring it to the end and to the success, well, then we will always be impressed and look at these speeches and say, well, this is great. But if you look how many really details we have in research, in which we are now transforming and we are getting better and better. But that's the fundamental basis. And this food chain we cannot cut. We have to promote it fully, and then we will also harvest our success.
So are we investing in the right places then? Anyone else?
Well, I think looking at this and what happened, I think we are doing in many ways the wrong things. So just a couple of examples. It starts very early. I mean, we're not educating our kids probably the right way. So the curriculums, they haven't changed since 100 years, but the world has changed, as we've seen. It's even accelerating and changing. So we didn't adapt to this. Why don't we do this? Why do we not spend much more on education? Because this matters a lot. Why not everybody learns coding? Why are people learning Greek and Latin? Why not coding? It's also challenging. So many questions, I think. You have to basically see this, go after this much more fundamentally, basically to also be part of it, because otherwise we're missing out. And blockchain coming now, everybody's said, okay, what's the next wave after the internet came, or mobile? It's blockchain, full stop. I'm totally convinced with this. But who knows about this? How do we educate? How do we make fun of it? It becomes a huge problem, because we will see basically AI and blockchain technologies taking over complete middle management functions in most corporates. So you don't need people in insurances and banking anymore. The banks will be destroyed anyways, the normal function, because it's all happening on platforms. So same with insurances. So there are big problems coming up, and we don't react to this. And this, as I see, is a really big challenge, and this will drive us into the next crisis, besides all the technical developments which is happening. So I think we need to really see this, and OpenAI really make these hard steps in many cases to change this to the better.
Mm-hmm.
And what we see here, I think it's also important to differentiate between the marketing side, the customer side, and the technology side. And I agree with my colleagues that we have to invest a lot in building up our basic capabilities in science and technology. And I think the ETHs are doing a great job on this front, by the way. But what we need to understand is also that the world of customer acquisition, sales, etc., is something where I think we might be a bit on the too modest side here in Switzerland, because we are truly great in many great technologies. And just to give you one example, take a guess how long it took Pokemon Go to reach 50 million customers. Yeah? It took 19 days, 19, to reach 50 million. And that's a huge number. Imagine any of your startups reaching 50 million customers within 19 days. That's not even end of October. Yeah? So in that sense, I think this marketing side should not be forgotten, and digitalization, reaching customers more easily is one part of this. And I think one part that is actually driving what we have seen there in terms of exponential growth of some companies.
Some elements which probably are worrying from time to time for me is that really the businesses change. In some field, not. There is a lot of food companies which are still the same as 20 years ago. Mm-hmm. But I think what is surprising or interesting to look at, the most valuable company today is they don't sell a product where you pay something for the product and the quality of a product. They sell a search, mm-hmm. but actually don't pay something for search, but you pay by looking at ads. Mm-hmm. And this is confusing. And it's for me a little bit worrying that these companies are doing much more money than a car company, which is selling a car, which is reliable and has to function. Software companies are selling me software, which don't operate, and very often they sell stuff which I don't even pay, but I pay with some elements which I actually probably don't want. And I hope this will change back, because it cannot be that these people really building reliable cars or really good food making much less money than those just offering a network and having the clients.
Okay. So what I'm also hearing in that is that you're not quite ready to buy a self-driving car or pay the extra premium for it.
So let me tell you something. I think it's not we are not getting back. Because I think what matters is the customer relationship. If you have a customer relationship, basically you have the trust of the customer, for whatever reasons, basically, you're being the one earning money. And this goes for car manufacturers, because in the end, nobody cares which kind of car you're driving. You want to get from A to B. Uber demonstrated this, they're earning more money than owning this. All these car sharing companies are not earning money. Not at all. So Car2Go and the Drive Now, they're not earning money. They're losing money. Why? Because they own the cars. So you have to have built this relationship with the customer, and this goes for food companies as well. There are many new food companies coming up, much more successful, much more profitable than the traditional ones, because they build somewhat the customer relationship. And this goes over all industries, basically. And if you have this, you own this and maintain this, then you're probably the one earning most of the money in the value chain.
I'm not fully sure if this is the case, because on one side, of course, the customer relationship is very important. But the difference with Google and Volkswagen car is that I buy something and I got exactly what I want, and I can select. With Google, they offer me a service. I don't pay something, but I indirectly pay. And I think this is a huge difference. And I think there is a tendency which will hopefully move also a little bit backward. Fake news. Economist is now moving towards the direction that we are envisioning that we will have no income by ads. The customer will pay. But they will pay because they get good information. And I think there is, in a lot of fields, something which will also probably change back, because we as a customer, we can influence this, and we will learn in every day what we want and what we probably don't want.
This is a hope, Roland. This is really a hope, because sometimes we forget that we are responsible for the success, because we are the buyers and we are taking the products. And you see that there starts already at some points where people think, well, why do I pay somebody who has nothing really done in this entire process? That starts already. But I agree with you, this will come with more education. And you touched the right point. I think the education point is one of the very, very crucial parts, because the society problems which are ahead of us, every success here, 13 people, you have seen it, compared to 140,000, will change the society, and this kind of awareness will have a significant influence of the entire development of certain businesses as well.
And maybe just add to this line of thought, I think being in Switzerland, in a country that has a lot of trust in the world. You know, you can hardly think of other countries who enjoy that much trust. I think startups that are domiciled here, that develop business models in the digital world to verify identities, to verify news, I think would have a great future, and we're seeing some traces of this happening right now already. But I think this is a huge brand capital that startups in this country can draw on, that I think countries in the startups in the US or in many other nations cannot draw on. You know, so I think there's something that for our country and our startup ecosystem to do it.
Great. Should we take the second and open it up to the audience if there's any questions? Any questions from the audience? Can't see any mics roaming. You had a thought you were going to jump in.
Yeah, maybe one thing. Look, I do think that not embracing these technologies, right, for any company, big or small, it equal to die in a way or the other, okay? And I do think that startup and SMEs, exactly because in order to create value, you have to connect this technology in the proper way, right? They have huge opportunities to play in the field. But, you know, there are, and I'm very convinced that this will impact all industries, also the one that you think are more traditional. And think about pharmaceutical, and think about counterfeiting drugs. It's 600 billions of market impact, the counterfeiting drugs, okay? And in certain countries, you know, that impact 70% of the drugs that are used. And that, of course, is very bad for the society, not only for the company. So being able to use technologies like blockchain, crypto anchors to connect the physical world with the digital one and ensure that this counterfeiting goes down is wonderful for the company, but is also very beneficial for the society. And the society then will have trust only in the company that can guarantee, you know, that what you buy is what you were asking for.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And well, and to build on that, what other ways do organizations need to really prepare, you know, for the amount of change, you know, thinking about this that would really bring? Is there anything else that you can think of how IBM, you're set up well, or other things that you need to be considering?
No, I do think that if you go back to the full story, probably 95% of the value, as you were saying, is around data. Okay, and there are other things, but data is a big and important piece. So trying to gain trust in people, businesses, on how the data are used, on the property of the data, on the monetization of the data, in my opinion, will be a very, very crucial thing for everybody. As a company, we are doing it since a few years. We have some policies around that, right? But it's not something that the company only can do. Yeah, has to be global dialogue and try to get the right rules, because ownership and use of data is different in different environments. For example, in basic research, having structure that allow to have, for example, open data platform, it is very, very, very important, right? To give an example.
I think it's hard to rely really on patterns of the past, or basically if you're looking back in terms of your example in terms of Switzerland is kind of a trustworthy company. We are entering a trustless world with blockchain algorithms, so everybody can have trust. These networks, they have trust, and they should be trusted. So we don't need somebody who provides trust. And just to this example, Daimler couldn't rely on basically building the best car. It's about self-driving cars, and nobody cares on which kind of car you're sitting in the future. So I think this needs to be adapted somehow and basically implemented much faster or reacted much faster. So this is, I think, part of the learnings we have seen. And coming from Germany, I see the corporate world in Germany who are way too hesitant acquiring new technologies, whereas Google, Facebook, and they all live from basically acquiring new technology and implementing them. And this is by far, at least speaking for Germany here, it's not by far not the case what corporates are doing in Germany. They're so hesitant basically adapting this. And this would probably have an impact in the future, because they miss out certain trends and will lose big time pretty soon.
So what I heard you got is that the people implications is what obviously trust. And I boldly, as an American, heard his invitation, come over and hear our mindset. I'm sure some of that. How did you feel when you had heard that? Or really, do we here have the right mindset and the people skills and the trust that you mentioned? What are the implications of us as human beings, and how we need to be ready for the implications?
I mean, generally, it's very positive. I think different cultures have different ways how to do it. And at least especially for Switzerland, very positive that we have the right mindset. We do it probably a little bit different. But nobody knows exactly what's in the future. Probably it was mentioned a couple times, blockchain and similar technologies. Right now, these biggest, most valuable companies have mainly the value because they have the clients. Blockchain will actually connect people directly without having some intermediate. So you could imagine that all of a sudden all these companies will have a serious issue, because they will not have somewhat the control over connecting clients anymore, and then they're not needed anymore. At least they cannot gain a lot of money out of this network. And so there might be some changes which are drastic in the near future, which will then promote new technology, other technologies which are getting more valuable.
Is it like X Prize contest? Is that what we need? Or what's going to be that impetus?
I think what we need is just young people, which are dedicated and really passionate about bringing the world forward in all different fields and really giving their life into this.
Great. Any other questions from the audience? Take another break. Do I see one hand over here? Yeah. Let me try back on.
So concerning the idea of the technical singularity, do you believe in this concept? What date do you think it will occur at? How does society best prepare for it? And what do you think the most exciting opportunities are there?
So, look, I do think that we have to go away a little bit from, religious, you believe or don't believe. I do think that if you bring the things on a scientific viewpoint, I cannot say something around that direction will not happen as a scientist, right? It will be next 10 years, 20 years, probably not. But the thing that I can tell you for sure that is in these 10, 20 years, if we want to use data and AI to make a difference, and we can in our business, in our world, there are many other problems that we have to try to focus and solve to make that happen. For example, bias in data and the AI model will be a big, big, big problem. Human biases. Mm-hmm. The fact that AI models can this day act in a relatively easy way. We have to try to find a way, while we are applying it today, because we have to do it, to correct and detect these problems, right? And these things are much more important than think about there will be a singularity or not.
Okay.
I learned from my very early teacher, no method is a panacea. And I still, this holds true till today. And what I found extremely interesting in a way, Roland said it very clear. We have to separate some of our problems. And if you look, if they could really hold the promise that in 10 years' time they solve the CO2 problem on this planet, well, then I would say that's the right direction. But I don't see any of the solutions that immediate within the next 10 years. Some of the major challenges will take more time, and that goes a different route. This is not just words, this is really hard work.
And I think there's a second very important component. When we separate technology from its application, there's always, I mentioned the entrepreneurial imagination, but also there's a moral judgment of what we want to do with technology. And there's a dark side to it, because there are people out there that have moral judgments that are fundamentally different to us, and they would say the use of technology for some other purposes. Think about automated drones that kill people, and this is just a small example. We have seen many more examples already in the making. We should not forget about this dark side too, and I think this is, with all the abundance and the positivity that we heard, I can think of as many examples of where technology in the wrong hands with the wrong purposes can do a lot of harm.
A little bit of caution there. Okay, here another question down here.
Yeah, so we talk about exponential change, and that's great. But what happens when the rate of change exceeds the human brain capacity? When society changes faster than we can actually metabolize ourselves? And at that stage, what will happen, I think, is that people who are extremely intelligent will get ahead a lot more than other people, and I fear it's going to create a clash between those who can catch up and those who can't. And then it's what do you think is going to happen then, and how to mitigate it?
Thank you. I agree with you on this. I think this is a risky element, that all this new technology will people which are good in analytic thinking and using these tools much stronger, and some people will be left behind. And we have to watch this out. Of course, there is still elements. I'm in robotics, and if you see how the progress in robotics is for cleaning up your kitchen, you will not see a robot cleaning up your kitchen in the next 10, 20 years, I'm pretty sure. You will have some primitive stuff, but really doing the same as humans can do. So there is probably still some element which is not the intelligent what these machines today offer. It's another type of intelligence, which is much more. It's interacting, it's tactility, it's all this sensing. And I'm somewhat not so worried that this will happen so fast. But in a way today already, I think those who are good in using artificial intelligence, or even searching and for information and really capturing the information very fast, they have an advantage. And this is getting bigger, and there is a risk that we are drifting apart, and this is not good for society.
If you look how much progress we made in medical research, very serious. However, if you look into the major challenges, if you look into cancer, just the understanding of the quantitative biology, we're by far, or really far, far away actually, to really generate this understanding. And I'm fairly sure that this is part of what you mentioned. The methods we apply, there we have to do at the moment already risk analysis, that we don't touch who we are and what we are at the moment. This is the higher risk than that we are exceeded by other machines. I think we should not change our genome in the most significant way that we cannot bring it back.
There's a question.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Just a bit provocative, maybe a bit negative. Isn't the window of opportunity closing up for Europe? You said data, between 4 to 6 billion computers or devices or components are built by Americans in Southeast Asia. No Europe, all the semiconductors disappear. The processing of the data is done in two internet, one US and the other is China. No sign for Europe. The funding is accelerating elsewhere. Here we are talking of raising a fund of 150 million. Now it's normal elsewhere to have multi-billion fund for investing in innovation. So it seems that the window is closing up and the gap is actually enlarging more and more. Any comment?
Well, I think besides the fundamental issues on the education, I think we have a funding problem here as well, because we're not spending enough on basically on venture capital, so to name it. So when we started 20 years ago, there was a gap between the US and Europe, and it was a factor of 8 to 10 between capital spent per capita. So, and this has not changed. We have still the same gap. Obviously, at another magnitude. That means we didn't catch up at all since 20 years now. This needs to be changed. If I see SoftBank, spending 100 billion now, raising the next 200 billion fund and investing into obviously later stage companies, technology, but we are by far not on the level which we would need to be to catch up and to fund companies. And this is what we see. We see it in Europe everywhere. Companies are being bought from the US competitors or US corporates, and they then basically inhale the technology and wouldn't say kill the company, but then at least they stop of these things becoming big standout companies, and this is only overcome if we spend more and invest more money, and the corporates have to, everyone has to, so really across the industry and society has to be an awareness that we need to spend much more basically on this asset class to build big companies. Otherwise, it's not going to happen.
Let me add a bottom-up perspective to this, because I'm seeing at EPFL and probably that at ETH as well, hundreds of young entrepreneurs. And if I just can look back at the last 15 years since I've been at EPFL, there has been such a significant change in terms of the mindset the students have in terms of entrepreneurship, the ambitions, the skills. They also think big. Before that, they always wanted to create a company in the Canton de Vaud, and they were happy if the Canton de Geneva would buy the products. And they are no longer in this mindset. And I think changing a mindset, and we all know this is very, very difficult. It's a cultural change. And I think we are in the middle of that cultural change. So I'm not as pessimistic, but I have the same concerns that were just voiced, but I'm not as pessimistic, because there's lots of deep technology that is in the DNA of Europe where we do have some advantage, hopefully.
Yep, and we'll do one final question from the audience.
But I would really like to comment on your question. I think what bothers me a little bit and worries me is actually this is not random from the eastern part, it is strategic. And you can really see that the investments are driven by the politicians and the government, and they really go into the right and most challenging problems. And I think actually that we need this support, political support, going really strategically. That's the missing part which we have here. None of these visitors from China are here random. It looks random, and they all, indicate they don't know from each other. I don't think this is completely random. They have a structured plan behind it.
Final question from the audience?
No. Can I have? If we have such a great panel, we should not stick too much to the time, because I know you are really here, and it was not easy for you to be here. Let me just inform that the people in here, if you have one-to-one meetings set up, it's going to start at 15:20. But I don't want to interrupt this here. I think we still have a bit of time flexibility. But for those who have one-to-one meetings, they are starting at 15:20 in scenario 1 and 2, which is just on the same level in this direction. So now let's go back to you guys. I really enjoyed this discussion with you. Okay, here's the question.
Over here.
So there was mention about taking big leaps in something that'll change the world in 10 years, like carbon emissions or big leaps and bets. But from an entrepreneur's perspective, the incentives to do a big bet now may mean that I might be diluted completely by the time that gets done because of the amount of investment that would have to go in. So is the real bet, so the first question is what are the incentives correct for the entrepreneurs here still when they're doing these startups to be aligned? And second, is the real center of mass for these high risk, high bets at the universities or research institutes? And is that the core that has to enable the entrepreneurs to make these kinds of changes?
I like that one.
Right, but this is a typical European question. Because in America, nobody would ask for incentives. I mean, this is very clear. They just go, right? And they bet on something. Here, you want to have somehow your risky way paved with something. And what I see, luckily, our students don't ask this question anymore. They have an idea, and if they are convinced, they go for it. And I can tell you one thing which is really a bet with 100%, I would say, really security or no risk. If you see the digital construction, which has been developed, and you see actually the crowd working in the ArcTech lab and around the professors, you can see in their eyes that they know exactly they will save a lot of CO2, they will save a lot of resources, they will make a significant contribution to sustainability, and it's, for them actually, it's not really very important to be successful at the moment because they know they work on something which is really going into the next level. They are diluted because we started fairly early, 2003. Now we have this NCCR together with the EPFL, and you see it's slowly spreading. Convincing the construction industry takes a lot of time, but there is no question it will come very soon.
So maybe it's a time for a final question. So we've got to look into the future. So if we were having this discussion 5 years from now, like we're on that verge of these autonomous cars, right? JP wanted to know, when are we going to be driving those things? So 5 years from now, put on your hats. Or what would be that topic that might have become reality, that might be a little far off, but that is the point of exponential technology?
Well, in 5 years' time, I still drive my old-timer because I like these old cars, and I will never buy a car without a steering wheel. That's the first comment.
He won't either.
100%. I mean, I hope they leave me the degree of freedom. But I would say, actually, in 5 years' time, we will have this actually growing community at the universities even bigger. More will think about and evaluate their own ideas. And I think in 5 years' time, we will not be supporters of the existing companies because people will be very intelligent to walk the last mile on their own to make themselves actually successful.
So I do think that one thing that in 5 years from now, technology-wise and application-wise of AI, data, and so on and so forth, I believe that technologies like Debater that IBM developed, that help to take data and knowledge and bring this data and knowledge back with the right arguments to professionals, right, to get the specialized knowledge in a much better way, will become a reality everywhere. Yeah, we have demonstrated that now, but will become more generally used. Yeah.
Let me answer the inverse of your question. Because I hope we don't have the discussion why we didn't use all these technologies for the good of the human race and the human people in terms of sustainability and social concerns. There are so many out there, and I think time is running out. And if we are still debating that in 5 years, how we can use technology for improving the life on the planet, sustainability and social dimension, I think we will all be sorry.
Yeah, I think in 5 years we will seriously debate what to do with the issue of basically losing white and blue collar workforce, because I think we will see much more robots in action, not for households, but on shop floors. We will see much more robots basically, or software taking over the middle layer of the white collar worker. So this will become a serious issue. In talking 5 years, I think this is something we will heavily debate at the point in time what to do.
So I'm probably more telling my dream, and I'm pretty sure that this can happen. In 5 years from now, hopefully there is no need about discussing, do we have enough venture capital in Switzerland for growth? This will be done and settled. And I'm convinced that Switzerland is becoming, and is probably in some field already, a leading country at the interface between digital and real world. Robotics, of course, my field is one of these topics, but where physics has an important issue, this is not what Silicon Valley is good at. And I think there is an opportunity which we already starting to take, and we will grow and be extremely strong in this field.
All right, 5 years from now. So let's give our panel a warm thank you.
Yes, but more than that.